Well, hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Doctors Living Deliberately. So happy to have you here with us today. And welcome back to my co-host, Dr. Arpita Gupta DePalma. How are you?
I am good. How are you doing, Michael Hersh?
I am doing great and excited to have our guest on today. So before we jump into telling you about who's here with us today, one thing that our listeners may have noticed is at the end of each episode, we take a moment to tell them that coaching is not a substitute for therapy. And I think that this is something that comes up in a lot of discussions in the physician community. I've seen a lot of it on social media, kind of discussions between therapy and coaching. Do you have thoughts about this, Arpita? What have you seen?
Yeah, I think there is definitely an area for both, and even including mentoring, quite frankly, therapy, coaching, mentoring, they're all three different areas. And there's definitely areas of overlap, specifically also with therapy and versus coaching. And so being able to kind of distinguish when it's most beneficial and efficacious for somebody to undergo therapy versus when they should maybe have more of a benefit from coaching versus maybe both. Also, there's areas of overlap between the two. So I'm super excited to welcome our guest today, Dr. Priya Wagle. She is a colleague and friend who has, quite frankly, has partaken in both and has the experience and knowledge to be able to speak about that. And so, Dr. Wagle, welcome today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, guys. It's so nice to be with you both. Um, I'm a practicing otolaryngologist for the past 20 years, and I got certified in life and wellness coaching in 2021. I have my own coaching business for private clients, and I also contract with another coaching company for coaching with women physicians.
That's great. And you kind of have had some experiences with both therapy and coaching. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what your experience was and how you kind of have used both in your life?
Sure. Um, First of all, I want to say to you guys, thank you for having this topic on your show because I think it's really important. And I think that there's still, despite everybody's efforts, a stigma associated with mental illness and, going to see a therapist or a psychiatrist or sometimes even a coach. Um, but I came to this through my new journey after and during my divorce process. I have suffered from depression and anxiety for a good part of my life and have had therapy with several different therapists, psychiatrists, non psychiatrists. Um, and then sort of got to the point where it, I didn't feel that it was enough for me in terms of what my goals were. And I had also reached a certain level of mental health where I felt that when I found coaching, it was it sparked something in me that perhaps therapy hadn't.
So I guess for our listeners, if you were speaking to somebody who had really never heard about coaching or what it is, how would you differentiate therapy from coaching?
Sure. Coaching is about being intentional um, with your thoughts, goals, desires, feelings, relationships in a forward thinking manner.
Mhm.
Um, you can, work on your past, of course, in coaching with your coach. But in general, I would say that the focus is more forward.
Yeah, and I think one of the ways that I like to describe it when people ask me is it's future focused thinking, right? So this is where we are now. We're performing at our baseline level of function, but we're not quite reaching our fullest potential. We're not optimizing or maximizing how we can show up each day. And so when with the power of coaching, it's really having somebody kind of giving you other perspectives, other maybe options to consider for situations that you might be in. Because when we're in our own brain of how things are, it's really hard to see other perspectives. And so a lot of times I think working with a coach is great because it allows us to see perspectives that they're giving to us that we may not have once considered. And then how would you define that difference with therapy?
Right. It's not that, I think therapists can do that too. I think they are there to provide you with an objective perspective, if you will. But, I sort of see it as if um, you sort of need therapy to get to a point where you can use coaching. I think before I found coaching, when I was really suffering in my depression and with my anxiety, which I still manage. It's not that I'm completely out of that. It's treated and I live with it, but I'm not dysfunctional from it. And I think that therapists can really help you get from a dysfunctional level to a functional level. It's a very basic sort of um uh state to get to, and before you get to that state of function, I don't know that a coach is um sometimes we'll say to clients, listen, I don't know that you're ready for this yet, and I would refer you to, say, a therapist or a psychiatrist or somebody who can get to that functional level, because I think you do need, that's my opinion, I think you do need to get to a certain level of function before you can avail yourself of what coaches have to offer.
And so you kind of had your own journey where you mentioned that you were going through your divorce, and that kind of led you to therapy. So at
Yeah.
what point did you find that you had kind of gotten beyond that basic level of functioning, that you were looking for something more? How might somebody recognize that for themselves, and how did you recognize it for you?
That's a really good question, Michael. I mean, it is an evolution. It definitely is an evolution. And I want to point out that I was in therapy even before my divorce. And that was a sort of a situational depression, but I had suffered from depression just because, before. And I want to say that specifically for people who are listening, who are, maybe not so comfortable with the idea of being depressed or anxious, and to give them permission to admit it to themselves. You don't need an excuse to be depressed or anxious. It happens to people. That's number one. And I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Can you tell me again, please? I'm sorry.
It's okay.
What was I answering?
We were talking about how you kind of recognized for yourself
Oh yeah.
when.
Okay, got
Yes.
it. Right. Right. So so you feel yourself, at least this is what happened for me, I can speak for myself, is you feel yourself getting better and sort of having more hope maybe for the future, and becoming more functional and not suffering from all those symptoms of depression. And then I remember sitting in therapy sessions going, okay, so what do I do now? In my head. What do I do with that? Okay, so that's what my past is about, and this is why this happened, but
Now
where
what?
do I go?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now what? And I think it's a good point. It's almost like you will know, like when you're not able to perform your day-to-day activities in a way, or you're not at your baseline, that's where we do turn to the assistance and the help and the guidance of the therapist and psychiatrist to help us get there. And that may or may not include medication therapy, or it might just be CBT in a sense, or other behavioral or modification therapies. But when it gets to the point where you are performing fine, but you're really just feeling like you're stuck in the now and not reaching your full potential, I think that's when we start to recognize. And so just to like give an example, I think for me, what I realized is how I was showing up. I'm able to perform, get the things done, manage the household, manage the kids, manage the business, but I was showing up in a way that was so angry, not productive, not happy, not positive. And I didn't like it. I was like, I'm excelling in all these other areas to the outside world. And in my inside world, I don't like the way I'm showing up. I don't like why I'm always angry or resentful or whatever it is. And I couldn't figure out why that was happening. So, I'm able to manage my day to day, but I'm not performing in a way that really I was proud of, that I felt like I could do better in. And that's when I said, let me consider this, because I have tried everything. I don't understand what I don't. And we talked about this, Michael, at a different one. We don't know what we don't know, right? We are just kind of living in our day-to-day routine, and we're not able to see outside of that sometimes. And that's where the help of the coach is, to help you recognize that there is more and you are capable of more. And I'm going to help you see what you want to do and how you're going to get there.
Absolutely. The way I saw my mental construct of my struggle at that point, where I was sort of emerging from therapy, was that I was underneath my life. It was like this mountain on top of me. And coaching really helped me to feel on top of it. So, that life wasn't happening to me, that I was leading my life. As you said, the word you used was intentional. And to optimize the experience you have of your life. I think that is what coaching does.
And there's some discussions in, again, when we see these discussions in social media communities amongst physicians, talking about the qualifications of physician coaches versus therapists versus psychiatrists. What's your insight here?
My uncle's a psychiatrist. I have immense respect for people in the the psychotherapeutic space. Of course, I would never put myself forward as somebody who would be an equivalent of that, or to replace a therapist or a psychiatrist. I think we do fulfill a very specific function as physician coaches, and my clients are physicians, and I have gone through specifically what they are going through, and have managed my mind in a way now, and I'm continuing, of course. I think it's a journey. I don't think it ever ends, but I think I'm in a unique position to take somebody through that process.
Yeah, I think as physician coaches, we have the beauty, the kind of the unique ability to be able to say, hey, we do this when we see our patients, right? When we are concerned, or we have this little red flag that I think this patient has anxiety, depression, whatever it is, we will refer them out to whoever we feel is going to be able to best serve them in that. And so that's where I feel like as physician coaches, we have this ability to be able to decipher, this is somebody who I am comfortable coaching, and this is somebody who needs a little bit of additional support, and we're going to send them that way too. And maybe they'll come back. Maybe we can do it both at the same time. Each case is very unique and individual, and that's what we have to look at and assess as part of our skill. You spoke a little bit about the stigma, or one of you guys spoke a little bit about the stigma regarding therapy and coaching. Talk a little bit about that. Like, what were you fearful even when you began your journey with coaching? About what people would think, and how did you overcome that?
Well, it wasn't when I began my journey with coaching. It was when I was in therapy. It was before coaching. And I think actually meeting the community of physician coaches that I've met has helped me destigmatize it for myself, and be more open to wanting to help destigmatize it for others, because I see how much suffering is around, and how much people need help. And, I guess I did have some shame associated with it, to the point where I wouldn't tell people what medication I was on, if I went to a doctor visit, because, as a physician, you're supposed to be in control. You're supposed to know everything and not have weakness. I do think as physicians that we're held to a certain standard that one could argue is perhaps not fair. We are human beings and we suffer just like everybody else. And this is a medical problem. I tell my patients all the time, you treat your hypertension, right? Well, the cortisol is streaming through your body and increasing your blood pressure. And this is just a medicine to help you with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the key here is that mental health, mental health is pervasive, right? It touches every aspect of every life, and physicians are not immune to that. And so an opportunity to destigmatize this, to begin the discussions, to talk about it. And you both so eloquently have pointed out that we as physicians, we address the mental health of our patients day in and day out. And that is regardless of medical subspecialty, right? As Arpita, as a pediatrician, Priya, as an otolaryngologist, I deal with mental health issues in the realm of gastroenterology day in and day out, because you can't separate these issues from the human element, right? It is part of who we are. And so I think it's so essential that we are here talking about these issues, normalizing it, and making it so that physicians know that all of this stuff is normal and that we can't ignore it, that there's so much going on in healthcare right now that is so, that mental health is so involved with, that it's time that we do spend some time talking about it and addressing these issues. And so I'm so glad, Priya, that you're here today to talk through this and your own experiences. So if you were, are there key points that you would want our listeners to take away in kind of their quest to kind of figure things out for themselves?
Yeah, and so a couple points that I wanted to bring up that I haven't brought up yet is that coaching introduced me to the idea that I have a relationship with myself. And I did not know that. And so I had a default relationship with myself. Like we talk about intentional thinking versus default thinking. So I just had this default relationship with myself when I was really mean to myself. And that's one of the things that I think is so pivotal to discover, that once you discover that, the power you have to change your experience on this earth is just unlimited. That's number one. Number two, give yourself a break. I really just remember before I found coaching and this community, how hard I was on myself, and how now in coaching other physicians, how hard we tend to be on ourselves. And I think that is the culture that we inherit when we go through medical school and residency and training. And it doesn't need to be that way. You can still achieve, you can still be the best you can be, and do it with love for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you said that, it made me go back to the 5-year-old self. Like, would you treat or speak to your 5-year-old version of yourself the way you do as an adult? Right. Because again, it goes back also to this, we talked a little bit about the stigma around it, that, I don't want to, I'm going to be fearful of what other people are going to think. Why does it matter? Right. Why can't we just be okay with what we need to do for ourselves? We don't need to worry about why other people need services or what people might think if we need services. The point is that once you recognize that there is a need for yourself and you're able to act on that for your own sake, you're living in your own, with your own intention for what you want to do, right? And a lot of this is just, again, having the awareness. We think that people need to get coaching because they can't get their act together. Like, who needs a life coach? I was one of those. Like, what is this doing? The purpose is that, again, we're not aware of what we're not aware of. So when we can start to recognize we got to a point that something needs to change, let me consider this. Everybody's going to be on their own journey, on their own path for when they're going to be ready for it. But when you do, if you do, I would say you should. But when you do get there, it's completely transformational, right? It has
Absolutely.
nothing to do with, it has nothing. I mean, it might have a little bit to do with self-confidence or whatever. Like for me, the biggest thing was, why would anybody need a coach? I have got my shit together. I've got my act together. I don't have self-confidence issues. So it really wasn't making sense to me. Why do I need a coach? And that's where kind of the magic is, where you don't even know what you don't know. And that's what that coach helps you see. So
I also think as physicians, we tend to just do what we're told. A lot of the time that we have this idea of excellence that we have to get to, and we do it by performing for others in a way that may be really uncomfortable to us. We put aside our fatigue, we put aside our hunger, we put aside our feelings, and we get told that at a very young age when we're in, and we start our residency or even in medical school. Put aside your feelings. You need to be objective. It'll keep you from taking care of that patient. But we're never taught how to take care of ourselves after the fact. So we end up as these shells of human beings. That's why we have such a problem with burnout now, I think. But it doesn't need to be that way. You can look at the culture that is sort of presented in front of you and decide for yourself if you want to do that.
That's an incredible message of hope, right? Because it doesn't have to be that way. And I think the key takeaway from this is that there are so many options for everyone. And we are here speaking largely to physicians. There are so many options because your life doesn't have to look that way anymore, right? And there are therapists and there are mentors and there are physician coaches and lots of other different ways and communities for you to shift the current narrative to something that you actually want it to look like. And again, Priya, your message is so filled with hope, and I just appreciate it so much.
Thank you. And that it's genuine because it comes from what I went through. And I remember feeling stuck and feeling like, God, is this all there is? But the thing is, it's, this is my life. It's nobody else's life. So I should be able to decide what I want to do with it and how I want to think and feel and act through it.
Beautiful. So touching, so beautiful. Well, I am so grateful that we were able to talk to you today about this. Priya, tell our audience how they could find you and reach out to you if they're interested in working with you.
Sure. They can go to my website, which is priyawaglemd.com. And thank you guys for bringing me on. This has been so great. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, we'll have all of Dr. Wagle's information in our show notes so that you can reach out to her. And again, Priya, so glad to have you here today. We are obviously all friends outside of this, and it's just so great to get to chat with you and make sure that everybody else gets to know how amazing you are too.
And congrats on the podcast, guys. This is great.
Thank you
so much.
So kind. All right, my dear.
And thank all of you for listening. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Doctors Living Deliberately.
Take care.
Bye.